So, part 5, and I tried to see whether Ragnarok and Revelation was the same event or not. So, going from the Voluspa, uh, host of angels or Muspelheim. A ship comes from the east with the host from Muspel with Loki at its helm, and is chapter 16, Ragnarok, and everything else. So it goes on to say, to fight with the serpent, though about to die, he fears not the contest. All men abandon their homesteads when the warder of Midgard in wrath slays the serpent. The sun grows dark, the eclipse in Revelation. The earth sinks into the sea, described in the last part. The bright stars from heaven vanish, stars fallen from the sky. Fire rages, heat blazes, and high flames play against heaven itself. And again it is said as follows, and Vigrid is the name of the plain where the fight shall meet Surt and the gentle god, 100 miles. Megiddo. So with the times in history, I tried to pinpoint what Bible they would have had at the time of the Vikings. And it was fully translated around 400 AD in Jerusalem by Jerome, but by a little note from the translator Jerome, it says he changed it. Addressed to Pope Damascus in 383 AD, it is obvious that these letters could not amend anything in the Old Testament after the labors of the 70, and it was useless to correct the new, for versions of old scripture which already exist in languages of many nations show that their additions are false. I therefore promise in this short preface of 4 Gospels only, which are only to be taken in the following order: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, as they have been revised by a comparison of the Greek manuscripts. Only early ones have been used, but to avoid any great divergences from the Latin, which we are accustomed to read, I have used my pen with some restraint, and while I have corrected only such passages as deemed to convey a different meaning, I have allowed the rest to remain as they are. He changed things. This last part tells that he changed the meaning, and it's mostly unknown by Christian people. But in King James Bible we have today was translated from the Latin Vulgate, and then it goes back to the Greek Septuagint, and it's like the first Bible. Okay, so after more of my research, I tried to put like 200 plus hours into this, and from what I found at least, some things don't make sense, and it seems like some things are missing or changed or whatever. And the Bible seems to have stole things from the Vikings, or it's the other way around. And everything seems to evolve around the time of the Latin Vulgate Bible. The Latin Vulgate was the first introduction of Revelation along with other books, and though it was not widely introduced or popularized until around 1500. After the Latin Vulgate came the King James Version that we have today, and it goes back to the Greek Septuagint. King James Version got rid of some of the books that was in the Latin Vulgate, and not only are the books not included, but the meaning was changed also with the note that I mentioned. It should make you question why, at least. Some say it was to remove the heresies, and as I'm finding out, that it was to keep people calm and docile, essentially. To be one of the original kings, you had to be related to a god in Norse myth. One story that we have of Ragnar, he claimed to be descended from Odin. And the Vikings wanted more and more land, and they were running out of their own. And not only that, but the agriculture and farming as well. They explored to England where they encountered Christianity, and it came into play at that time. Christians tried to convert the Vikings into Christianity, and took a long time doing it. This was around the time of 793 AD, and the Vikings sailed to England, and one of the earliest northern pilgrims to visit Jerusalem and the holy places was 990 AD. Icelander Thorvald the Far-Traveled. I was trying to see who went where. And so if someone went opposite, they would have them same stories kind of thing. And so the first visit to Jerusalem, and then the visit from Christianity up there. And so when did they go up to the Viking lands? First Christian mission that we have reports of took place around 710 AD. And now you see where the Latin Vulgate comes in, though it was fairly new at the time. It would have been in some churches along with the Greek Septuagint Bible, slightly older, and it had been the one that Jesus probably would have read from. It starts to paint a picture of some of the history, though Vikings couldn't read or write, and they didn't like to write about their history and wanted stories to be passed down by word of mouth rather than text because they couldn't write it all hardly. They used runes to write, and from the time period, I'm guessing it would have been younger Futhark runes. And if they wanted something written down, it would be most likely written of a person of a high status kind of thing. They would have them write it, and they would kind of look like this. They would normally have some kind of artwork, make it a little bit fancy, and all these runes would tell the story. Another one. And they have this one, the rock runestone. And in my theory, Ragnarok. Rock runestone, so... The runestone was carved much later than the date event depicted, but it does describe Revelation-type things, and they wanted that story to be passed down throughout the ages because they never wanted that to happen again. They called it Fimbulwinter, and basically it was 10 years of winter without breaking. There was starvation, there was mass plague, and it really just seems like Revelation with all the things going on. And as a little side note, 536 is at that time period, and it's said to be the worst time to be alive. The Vikings saw that the Christians had treasure and land that they sought after, and that would be the first exposure to Revelations if they happened to read it in 793 AD. Only some Viking chieftains would be able to speak Latin, making the text rare or hard to read for them. And then you have the idea, why would Vikings try to read the text of another monotheistic god when they were after treasure and land? And it doesn't really make sense. And they also treated the first missionary harshly. The first Danish Christian Viking king, 826, Harold Clack consented to be baptized. And the transition to Christianity is marked by King Harold Bluetooth's runestone at Jelling, which dates to around 965. The stone displays an inscription which declares that Harold made the Danes Christian, but in reality the change in belief did not take place from one day to the next. The pagans basically hid and done their own thing inside their houses or something of that nature. So more on that, they still practice the old religion in secret. Various objects from the Viking Age testify to this, such as the mold of soapstone found at Trend in Himmerland. The mold would then be used for the production of crosses as well as Thor hammers. Thus, the craftsman was able to provide pendants for customers adhering to both religions. The Viking belief in Norse gods was then interpreted and drawn into Christianity, thus showing the different meaning. And as you can see here, there's cross and Thor's hammer. And they even had something called the wolf cross. And it looks something like this, or they have many other images that kind of look the same. So Vikings would go to Jerusalem in 990 AD, and they would have kind of the full exposure to all of their beliefs. And though it would be the solid mark for conversions to Christianity due to it being the home of Christianity, wouldn't be much conversion. It was just the start, as the king converted not too much earlier. And I guess there would be a next part for part 6.